Hi guys, it's Danny. Welcome to another Casual Sundays. Now today we will not discuss about the subject that I wanted to discuss about today because it turns out that video takes a lot more hours of editing. But no worries, we'll do it some other time. Today we're gonna talk about boiling orchid media, if it's a good idea or not, because I do still see people doing it. I'll tell you my experience with it. Now a while back I did make a video on the subject and I was telling you guys that I don't think it's a good idea quite at all. And I gave you some reasons for this, but back then I was talking purely based on my logic. In the meantime, I actually experimented it. So to understand if it's a good idea or not to boil our orchid media, let us first talk some theory about boiling. Now, through boiling, indeed, you will destroy bacteria, fungi, and all sorts of nasties. What you don't know is that by boiling, you're actually destroying a little bit the integrity of the material you are boiling. Now, the softer the material, the more it will be destroyed. While the material is hard, it will actually resist boiling. I'll give you an example. Try to boil a rock. Nothing bad will happen to it, but try to boil toilet paper and you'll end up with some paper mush. Now let's take for example our beloved bark chips. We do like to boil this stuff. Now you might say this is a tough material. Quite honestly, it's not that tough. It's certainly not as tough as rocks. Bark is actually a sort of a medium tough material, and you know that it kind of breaks down after a few years of use. So it's certainly not as tough as rock. It's certainly not as soft as toilet paper. It's somewhere in between. Now when you're gonna boil bark chips, you will destroy its integrity slightly. Now let's talk about decomposition. Strange analogy, isn't it? Well, think about this thing. The microorganisms that are responsible with decomposition, they destroy integrity of materials, well, biodegradable materials, in order to eat them. This is why something that is decomposing is disintegrating as well. So if you think about it, if you boil media, you're making these microorganisms' life much easier. They already have a slightly degraded material to feed upon. Not to mention that if you open up the structure of the bark by boiling it, you're making it more water retentive. And decomposition microorganisms love wet materials and wet environments. So not only you're making their life a little bit easier, you're also actually providing them a more suited environment for them to do their job. Funny fact, this is why bark chips degrade slower than sphagnum moss. Sphagnum moss is softer, is more moist, thus it gets decomposed faster by these microorganisms. Okay, but this is the theory. Let's see a practical example. So as I was saying, I unwillingly noticed the effects of boiling media. So this is the Brassavola Jiminy cricket. When I purchased it, it did not have roots. Thus I thought, well, it cannot have snails. So I just planted it in normal media without actually sterilizing its rhizome with hydrogen peroxide, which is known to kill snails. Now, if I have the videos back then in which I say this, I will just add them in an info card or annotation somewhere on the screen. I'll see if I can find them. I actually mentioned this. So after a little while, I see that the orchid starts to produce roots. But after a few days, I discovered the new roots munched off. So I had a snail infestation. What I did then was unpot the orchid, sprayed it with hydrogen peroxide, and as for the media, I thought, well, I'll just give it a tiny little boil to kill off all the snails. What can happen from a tiny little boil? So I boiled it, cooled it down, and then reused it with this orchid because the media was pretty fresh. It had 3 weeks of use. Now what happened afterwards was a little horrible. In about a month or so, the media started to smell really, really bad, like molds and decomposition. Every time I watered it was even more striking. Another thing that happened was the formation of molds, stuff that doesn't usually happen to new media when I repot an orchid. Also, I have a fungal infection on this orchid. This is only one leaf, but there are multiple leaves displaying this symptom on the other half of this orchid. And in a few months' time, I was actually forced to do something with this orchid. I unpotted and completely thrown away the media that smelled horrible. It smelled like it was used for 3 years or so. So the logical explanation is that I actually made the life of the microorganisms responsible with decomposition much, much easier. So they did their job. They're supposed to do this. But certainly they're not supposed to do this after a month and a half since I actually repotted my orchid. So the only answer to my question was, I boiled the media and I degraded it. And the degree of damage on that media blew my mind. I really did not expect it. Now, the type of media you want to boil will have a saying in this as well. If you want to boil leca beads, pretty much nothing bad will happen. Leca is not organic anyway, and it is really a rough material. If you try to boil kiwi bark, again, you might not actually have the same experience as me. I don't know yet, but this one seems to be tougher, less water absorbent, but you definitely will degrade to some extent this type of bark as well. If you boil normal, cheap bark, well, I really wouldn't do that because of my experience. It will happen pretty fast. So yeah, this type of normal bark really degrades faster than you think. And if you boil sphagnum moss, which I did, it's even worse. This will degrade super fast. I mean, it will degrade in 5 minutes, more than 1 year. So bottom line, if you have an inorganic material, it's okay to boil it if you want to boil it for a reason or another. Lava rock, leca beads, I don't know, clay materials. You can boil them, just make sure you don't break them, because some break. But if you want to boil organic orchid media, I would really strongly suggest that you think again. This is just my experience, this is what my logic tells me, and sadly it was confirmed by my experience. So the best thing I can tell you is that if you have an infested media, just throw it away and use brand new media. If you're not sure if the brand you're using is completely sterile, then just stop using it. And I'll give an example. I stopped using Orchid Focus and my world is a lot better. So it's not a solution to actually boil it to sterilize it, because you are damaging it way too much, and it's not okay to repot orchids that often. So keep this in mind, and I hope this will be useful for the future. So okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please give it a thumbs up and a share. Subscribe to my channel for daily orchid videos, and feel free to leave me a message down below in the comment section if you have questions or suggestions for videos, and I'll get back to you. If you click on the left side of your screen, you'll be directed to orchidnature.com, where you'll find care sheets, identification sheets, and also you can talk to us in the forum section. And if you click on the right side of your screen, you can watch another orchid video. Thank you for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!